Welcome to the eSports Business Podcast, where we connect the time-tested principles of business and team management with the rapidly growing eSports industry. I'm Ben Wiggins here with Shivneet Sharma. Thanks for checking in with us.
Today we have Stephen Buhl on the show to talk about his company, Pipeline Gaming. Pipeline's mission is to create a community of high school esports teams that compete and get coached by esports professionals from the Bay Area. He's passionate about enabling the rising generation to reach their potential by bringing teams together and giving them top-tier feedback. His energy about promoting esports from the street level is palpable, and we're super excited to hear from him on the show today. But before we get to that, let's go over some smaller headlines. An in-game shop that sells esports team branded items will be added to Rocket League on April 16th, developer Psyonix announced. First revealed in November, and as reported on by Esports Observer, the in-game esports shop will sell items featuring the branding of organizations that compete in the Rocket League Championship Series, with a cut of the revenue shared with each respective team. Psyonix has not yet disclosed how item sales revenue will be split with the teams. Further details on which teams will be included in the initial program, as well as what kinds of items will be sold, will be announced next week. Psyonix originally promised to launch the esports shop by the end of the RLCS Season 7 World Championship, but it's going live on the earlier end of that expectation. The season begins the regular season play this weekend with a $1 million prize pool in the US dollars and introducing the South American region to the world competitive scene. Ben, what do you think about all this branding and Rocket League getting into this?
Welcome to the future. Welcome to the future, folks. Every esport is going to go this way, just like the NFL has, just like the NBA has, just like Major League Baseball has. The idea of selling, player jerseys, this is a time-tested strategy with comparables all over traditional sports. The one thing that we have to be a little bit wary of is because things like this are not being collectively bargained yet. And that, for anyone who's not aware, that just means that the player base forms an association or union and negotiates the particulars of a deal like this as a group with ownership. And in esports, collective bargaining is going to look a little bit different than it does in traditional sports. No one owns baseball, as we've talked about. Blizzard owns Overwatch. No baseball team owns the intellectual rights to baseball. In traditional sports, players are bargaining with team owners. In this case, the players are bargaining with the team owners who are also bargaining with the publisher developer. So in the case of traditional sports, the league and the owners are kind of one entity and the players are another entity. In esports, you're actually bargaining between three entities, and that may make things a little bit more complicated. For right now, the main issue is that the publisher is getting to make all the decisions. And so until you get collective bargaining into esports more wholesale, the revenue splitting may be a little bit fraught. And eventually, there may be litigation over something like this. But in the meantime, this is a great step forward.
I understand what you're saying. I think whether it's in the right and the wrong for the developer of the game to have more of the revenue, I think that's fair, right? Because most video game studios aren't building games for the esports scenes, right? They make their sales off of microtransactions, through, if you do it correctly, right? You do it through skins and non-game advantageous buy-ins, right? So the revenue sharing I'm not afraid of. The one thing I'm worried about, and it might just be a natural flow of how this happens, is that will teams be more incentivized to keep players because jersey sales are going up? Or vice versa, right? Will other players want to go to other bigger brands, right? We look at when LeBron left Cleveland to the Lakers. I guarantee you their jersey sales shot up. When Durant left OKC to Golden State Warriors. When Antonio Brown left the Steelers, he went to Oakland Raiders. I mean, all of these I'm afraid that how does revenue sharing happen when these players are jumping teams? I'm afraid that there are no legacy players in esports. So what if someone still wants to buy CLG Double Lift jerseys? Does Double Lift get that profit? Does CLG get the profit? Does Riot, where do we draw the line?
Well, the answer to your specific question at the end is yes. I mean, CLG, in the NBA, you can buy throwback jerseys and the at some point they stop manufacturing. Like the league won't still be selling LeBron Cavs jerseys, but you could buy them on eBay. Now they've already been purchased by someone else. So, the league looks for, basically what the league wants to do is offer as many varieties as possible. And because that leads to more spending. And esports, I think, will follow that model. But in terms of player movement, that what you're talking about is actually a slightly different issue, which is why doesn't, how come we can't get players to stay with the same team for a long time? Why is there so much player movement? And I think that's probably going to be an even bigger issue in esports than it is in traditional sports. But I do think that collective bargaining will lead us to a place where players will stay with a team for a period of years, somewhere between 3 and 5 years. And then you'll have some form of restricted free agency, and then you'll have unrestricted free agency. And that seems to be a good model in Major League Baseball, in the NFL, in the NBA. Esports are going to be slightly different, but probably not significantly different, I don't think. Our guest today is the founder and CEO of Pipeline Gaming, Stephen Buhl. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being on here.
It's great to have you here. So let's start with just a brief, give us the 30-second elevator pitch on what Pipeline Gaming is.
So Pipeline Gaming is an esports training academy that recruits local high school teams from around the San Francisco Bay Area to compete against each other in esports like League of Legends and Overwatch. Essentially, we want like a simplistic coaching style that revolves around scrimmaging and reviewing team VOD reviews. And so how that would work is just once a week we would meet in person, maybe like 3 or 4 teams would come and scrimmage each other, and then we'd have college coaches watch their VOD reviews. And essentially, this is a way to reliably create a recruiting tool for these kids that want to go and play esports at the next level. And we want to also have like a nice YouTube, Twitch channel to go along with it so that we can keep our college coaches in the loop as well.
Okay, so it sounds like a little bit like, and we'll come back to the simplistic coaching style. I think one of the benefits of that is that it's very transferable, but let's hold on that for just a second. For the moment, it sounds like what you guys kind of are is like an AAU or like a broad club soccer organization for esports. Is that the right way to think about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, it's a lot like that in that privatized training is really what sets these kids apart, and that the ones that actually want to go to the next level are the ones that are pursuing this privatized training.
So I just want to know where the inspiration came from, right? A lot of people that start clubs and organizations for competitive esports obviously have some competitive background, and generally they have a huge gaming background. So like, when, not to carbon date you or anything like that, but like, when was your earliest gaming memory? Like what did you pick? What game did you start taking really competitively as well?
Well, it's a little embarrassing, but the first esport in quotes that I would say I traveled for was actually a competitive Pokemon. I started playing probably in elementary school, just like everyone did, battling their friends and stuff in the bathroom or whatever. But like, I loved that game, and I would just travel all around the Bay Area and all around California, just playing in tournaments like that, just for Pokemon, the video game. And essentially, I would say that what I learned from playing Pokemon was that that video games is a lot like sports, and that a lot of practice takes perfect, and that there's these communities that you can tap into to help you as well.
So from my understanding, the Pokemon competitive scene is very grassroots. It's super like community driven, and it's almost, I know people that are in also the Yu-Gi-Oh! Like TCG scene as well, and it's also very grassroots. Is that something that sort of inspired this kind of company? So like for you starting it up and everything, you saw the community, you saw how certain games can thrive very well based off how strong the community is for it?
Yeah, I think community was like a main thing for me, because like, yeah, playing Pokemon was super fun. Like, beating on kids was super fun. Winning was a lot of fun. But really, the most fun was like you show up to these tournaments and it's like, whoa, like I know all these people. Like these guys are not only are these my friends, but they're also really, really good at Pokemon. And I don't want to battle them, but like at least they're my friends and they're all here. You know what I mean?
Right. So then you decide that, that there's possibility in organizing a more formal structure for this. What was your step 0? What was your step 1? What did the process of implementation look like for developing Pipeline Gaming? Because it sounds like a fantastic idea. I mean, AAU is super successful. Club soccer is extremely helpful to young players, and it's also extremely lucrative. How did you get this going?
It started with Cal and having to literally go over to the Cal Esports Center and talk with, I believe it was Kirk Robles, the marketing director over there. And I sat down with him and told him about the program. He really liked it a lot, and it seemed like something that his students, his college players, would be interested in as well, just for that to make money doing this and coaching younger kids. And from there, he was like, yeah, sure, that's fine, but we need Energy Esports to be on board with it as well if you want to even use the facility. Because really, essentially, like it's a lot like traditional sports, but where it's different is that it's so much more expensive to maintain. Traditional sports, you don't have like 20 computers, a Wi-Fi connection, like all that you need to worry about. So that's definitely been like the biggest step for sure, is trying to find a good venue. I was talking with ESA Oakland as well about using their venue too, because they just have like a beautiful place over there. It's a really cool venue. That was the main step, was first finding someone else to have like computers for us to play on, essentially. And then from there, we just got to go to all the different high schools, and it's weird because there's lots of different types of esports teams. You'll go and you'll research a school. You'll be like, oh yeah, they've got an esports team, and it's like, oh, all they play is Hearthstone, or they only play StarCraft 2. And so it can vary a lot, which has been that's what's been kind of difficult right now, is trying to hone in all these different types of teams right now, and seeing who we can really work with,
From my understanding, in the earlier days of like League of Legends specifically, there was this league called the High School Star League. Are you guys sort of, because I'm not sure what the High School Star League is doing right now, but are you guys sort of, I wouldn't say competing with them, but are you guys trying to structure yourself kind of like that, and going into high schools and developing an ecosystem and almost like skeletal structure for esports at like the high school level, right? So then college teams like RMU, San Jose State, all these like really good, UC Davis, all these colleges that are really excel in esports. Are you trying to almost make high schools sort of get recognized by them?
Yeah, exactly. We want to try and make the infrastructure for high school esports, because right now, like, there is some. I mean, right now you've got the High School Esports League is a probably big one, and Play Versus. Those two are like you could call high school infrastructure for esports. And you could I mean, personally, I spoke with High School Esports on the phone about this program, just because I was kind of worried about seeing it as competition, and was worried that they might just even say, oh no, like none of our schools can do that. We don't want them to do that, because we want them to spend all of their money with us. And I just called them. It was a 5-minute conversation. They said, no, yeah, this sounds awesome. This sounds like a great way for like our kids in High School Esports League to get even better. And mainly the reason why it's not really competing against other programs is because it like works well with those programs, and it's starting off like very localized. So like really we're just gonna try and find 4 League of Legends teams in the Bay Area and 4 Overwatch teams in the Bay Area, and just from those 8 teams total, we can create so much content. We can not even just the content, but we can have them scrimmage against each other and get such high level practice. Even with just 4 teams practicing against each other once a week, they will get so much better so quickly.
Are you guys not opposed to maybe taking the best players from certain high schools, right? Because a lot of high school leagues that I see, a lot of their teams are, if you're talking about League of Legends, some of them are masters, some of them are challengers. I mean, you have people all the way down to plat and even gold in these teams because there's just not enough players interested. Would you guys be opposed maybe to getting like the best 5 players from like 10 high schools and forming a team and having that as like almost like as your own team to scrim, right? Is that something you guys are doing, or is it just I want to take the high school teams?
See, I like this idea, but it's kind of the misconception that I think people have about the program. It's about the scrimmaging, but it's also about the community. We can take all the best players and put them onto one team and have them scrimmage, and those would be the best players to get scholarships for sure, and they would be the most like they would be the easiest to work with for sure. But what we want to do is we want to bring in Alhambra High School. We want to bring in Alameda High School, Galileo High School. We want to bring in all these high schools to see not just like who the best players are, but we want to like try, like I said, infrastructure. We want to try and make these teams so that when they go back and they play, they're like, dang, we're pretty good. Like this is something we can really do, you know? And like,
so obviously at some point, like all of this has to support itself financially. So you mentioned that it's not just about finding the best players. Obviously it's about community, but to a degree, there will be some of it that's going to need to be about figuring out ways that you can eventually pay your staff, that you can pay venue fees if needed. I don't know how AAU handles things like that. My guess is that a lot of the venues they get for free. But so some of this at some point has to be about money, either in the form of donations or in the form of membership fees. So how do you balance that part of it?
So yeah, the only way this can work is if we can make money off of it. Essentially, we can't. It has to be feasible. It has to be. We have to be able to make money off of it. Essentially. So what we have to do, like, and I've been like researching this a lot because it's like you want them to come into your program and not be afraid of like the financial commitment or whatever. They want to be like, oh, I'm not paying that much, but really, this is like a high level. This is supposed to be something that you can get your kid a college scholarship with. And so what we want to ask our parents to do is to sign up for contracts to where they would guarantee that their kid would play for at least 6 months to as long as a year of practice, guaranteed. And if they want to buy out of that contract, they're going to have to pay like $500, something like that. And the point of that is not to make the money. It's to keep the kids locked in, because it covers what you're saying, it covers what I'm saying at the same time. It creates that consistent cash flow where we have four. If we have 4 teams, right, of 4 League of Legends teams, 4 Overwatch teams, and we have them all paying monthly fees, and it would come down to about the same as Gamer Sensei, like $15 an hour, something like that. $15 an hour, 5 hours a week, once a week. Or 5 hours a day, once a week, So when we have these guys coming in consistently, that's consistent money, and when they're contracted, we know we're getting this money for at least 6 months. And also it creates that community that I'm talking about. It creates like the competition. We know that there's 4 teams, that there's always going to be 4 teams there to play against each other, because like that's the main thing. If we got kids like dropping out as soon as they hit like, Grandmaster or whatever, and they just drop out, like, eventually we're not going to have any kids to play, they're just they'll feel like, oh, I paid enough for the program. I'm going to get out. And it can't be about that. It has to be about like, community, about team.
Aside from, just like getting people to sign up and so forth, what are the steps that you're taking right now as a business person to move the project forward? Like if you were to say, what your goals are for this year, aside from growing the membership, what sorts of inroads are you looking to make into the existing esports infrastructure in order to help make this more accessible for younger players?
Yeah, for sure. So right now we just want to get a good venue, and at Cal Esports, that's like our number one choice right now, because they've just got such a great LAN area, and they're just building more and more. They're building streaming services and stuff like that as well. But really, what we have to do is we just have to watch and see how college and high school esports blows up all around. Essentially, what I'm thinking is around California, because I think Pipeline Gaming in 3 years, I would like to expand to maybe like Sacramento, because I know that esports right now up there is actually getting pretty big, and you got the Sacramento Sting as well, who offer, like, I've talked with them a little bit about it already too, and they would definitely love to coach for us as well. The problem up there, which is why I'm saying it might take some years, is because they don't really have a good venue for us to do it yet. But it's just like with esports, all this stuff, it's kind of being built as we speak. And that's kind of what you got to look out for, is like, can we even do this here? Are there coaches that can coach for us? Are there enough teams to scrimmage against each other? And I think just as the years go on, it's just gonna get more and more. We're gonna see more high schools pop up. More college programs are gonna get like officially funded by the universities. But as for this year, we just want to just go to different local high schools. We've been talking with a few. Just gotta gauge the general interest before we even think about going anywhere else. And right now, we want to get way more teams than we can hold right now, because we only want 4 teams per group. But we want to see how many teams are even interested, and then we'll have to say sorry to some of them and just only let 4 in. And then if the program continues to grow, then we can start letting in more teams. We only want 1 day of practice right now, but if more teams want it, then we can go to 2 days to 3 days. Because we want to start this like small and easy to control. And we don't want too much like time commitment as well. We just want 1 day a week so that like kids and coaches can all come and not have to worry about like time commitments and stuff like that. So really, it's just like what we do is based off of how like high school and college esports grow. But like the main ways that I want to grow, I definitely would love it if we could go to Sacramento, and then maybe down to like to LA, like Santa Ana area. Because just wherever like esports is just really booming, because that's where the infrastructure can just sort of be just laying down, kind of like railroad tracks.
What do you do to fight the perception among parents, among legislators, that video games will rot your brain, or other silly myths that we hear about?
Yeah. So I think I've heard that for so long. It's just such a funny one to hear. I think really once I started watching esports or actually playing esports, it kind of realized in itself that like it doesn't rot the brain. It's just like gaming, esports. It's literally, I'll say it again, like traditional sports. Like I think that it builds a lot of teamwork. It builds a lot of like individual skills. Like just one in particular, like you can't get tilted. Like that's like the first thing you gotta learn with a lot of video games is handling your emotions. And I think the program itself, how we can help this, because really it can seem like it's gonna be hard for some parents to be like, oh, I swear there are schools that have scholarships for video games, ma'am. Like your kid is they can play this and they're not wasting time.
Yeah, this is a real thing. This is a real thing.
But I think how it starts is with like minimum GPA requirements and stuff like that to kind of show we're like, oh yeah, like can't get in here without 3.0, because really, end of the day, these I got an athletic scholarship. I know how the scholarships work. If you want to get a scholarship to go to college, you should have really good grades so you can get an academic scholarship too, because they're not going to give you a lot of money for unless you're like a god. But like it starts with the academics too, and parents knowing that we like care about their kids and not just about like how sweet they are at gaming and how they're like their headshots or whatever. Like we care about their GPA. We want them to be like champions of character. We don't want to like one rule we want to have with our program is like obviously video games is super like huge breeding ground for toxicity, and we just want like our program to be one that's just not toxic at all, like no toxic chat, anything like that. That way like we can just start like just this, like our program would be the start of just like a friendly community mold. So that way it's like people will see us being like pretty friendly community towards each other, and then the next time this is like when anyone else tries to set this up, they're going to start being friendly to each other too, and they realize, oh, this works a lot better than being mean to each other, I feel like. And it's just really it's esports. It's just like another tool that high schoolers can use, to get better, to get life skills and stuff. And I think parents are the last ones to figure that out because video games are video games. But I think they're gonna start proving themselves over these next few years. Like these tournaments have been getting crazy.
We've talked about fighting, the myths of esports and the myths of gaming, and we talked about how to help teenagers, get into esports and things like that. But I really want to know, and I think a lot of our listeners want to know, like, where do you see Pipeline Gaming in the next year and 3 years, right? I think that's a serviceable timeline.
Yeah. I think within the year we want to just be stable. We want to have 4 teams in League of Legends, and we want to have 4 teams in Overwatch. If we had that throughout the year, I'd be a happy camper. But idealistically, it'd be great if we could analyze which other esports are growing in the Bay Area and pick those up too. Right now, Overwatch and League of Legends are our main ones, so that's what we want to stay with this year. We don't want to, because the more programs we add, the harder it is to manage all of the programs. So I think starting simple for the first year is good. Moving on though, we want to, I say it, we want to expand both upwards and outwards. Like when I say expand upwards, that means we want to bring in new games, but new esports that we can coach. And we're still as I said, the simplistic coaching style that's easily we can just take it, put it into this esport, because all we're doing is scrimmaging other high schools and then watching the review and then getting better and then just positive feedback. So start small, start with 2 esports, but then within 3 years, we would like to expand, as I said, outwards to maybe, I would like to do the shooters and the fighting games mainly, because they just have so much entertainment value, people just love watching these shooters, and they love watching these fighting games, especially the niche communities. I feel like that's a good, that would be a good place for us to start. In terms of expanding upwards. As far as expanding outwards to other locations, like I said, Sacramento, it seems like a nice next pick, just because the Sacramento Sting have been really interested in it, and there's the high school esports scene is actually getting pretty popping up there. There's lots of I've been trying to follow a bit of the media about it. They're not doing too bad up there, honestly, and I think it's just going to keep growing, really, because all it takes is 1 or 2 kids who just really, really like League of Legends or Overwatch, and they're just and they hear about our program, and they're like, dang, all we need is 3 more people, and then we have a real team, our school will have a team. And it's just at that point, it only takes a handful of kids to come to our program and learn a lot about the game, and then go back to their school to essentially plant that seed and incite the change on their school and create this whole esports program. So it's we'll bring in 1 kid, send them back, and then that school will have an esports program. That's what the plan is in 5 years, is that we can have just 1 kid come. We don't have to go to a school and recruit a whole team. We can recruit 1 kid from this school, 1 kid from this school, and sort of do what you're talking about and create some super teams, because maybe not all schools have enough kids that are applicable. Sure, maybe there's the school has a bunch of silver kids that are playing, but they got 1 guy in platinum or something at best. And so it's sure, we'll take that kid from platinum from each from 5 different schools. We'll make 1 East Bay team to compete against the other high school teams. That way all those guys can get way better with good kids, and they can go back to their high schools and be like, hey, esports, it's dope, you should play with me, we can make a club. And it starts with we want to build the infrastructure, but we have high school esports has to grow, and college esports has to grow too. But college esports isn't going to grow until high school esports until it looks until a university like Stanford or a UC, anything like that, can look at esports and be like, oh, this is lasting. This isn't going anywhere. This is super entertaining. This is super popular. No, this isn't going anywhere. These kids will always love esports. So we can give them money for it. It's a reliable. We can get this going in our school. They're not gonna make esports programs if it just looks there's not even anyone watching or playing it, because it's it is still kind of tricky right now. And even I don't really understand how esports is going to evolve in the future with new titles. Because that's like a main thing too for me, because that could change everything. What I think is, sorry, I'm kind of going on another tangent here, but what could really be the change is in 5 years when we have these AAA titles that focus on esports from day one. And so like imagine the Call of Duties, like even Overwatch. I mean, Overwatch is doing fine now, but like Call of Duty is a better example because they're sold. It's such an old game. Imagine if Call of Duty made a new game to where they were like, okay, we have our base game, whatever, but we also have an esports like team. We have a whole dedicated team to esports. Like they already have that now, yes, but they're not doing it from day one. And the difference between doing it now, like later, and doing it from day one is that you're gonna have like actual. It's gonna be like releasing a sport. You know, you're gonna be able to release something that people can like play with their friends and do ranked and stuff like that. And it's gonna be an actual consistent system, as opposed to now where it's just like you've got some pub games and maybe like you can join some friends together and get some ranked going.
What do you think has stunted or prevented the high school structure from developing? Or is it just sort of, this is the Wild West, like no structure exists and somebody eventually has to go out there and impose some kind of order on it? Or is there actually something that's holding it back?
I think the answer to all of those questions is yes. I think I think parents right now and just the whole rot brain, thing, that's kind of holding it back right now. And that video games are video games. They're games, they're not, it can't be a sport. That's kind of what's being held back right now, to the point where it's like the schools don't want to fund it. And it's like, even universities are like having kind of trouble, even though there'll be it's like a university will have teams that compete in like TESPA or whatever, and they'll try and get funding from the university, and they just won't like it. They'll think it's like bad. It's not even they don't. It's not like they just don't like esports. And it's kind of weird. I think that like the universities for sure are definitely holding esports back a lot. They don't realize what like that they could be tapping into something very, very, very useful for their school. And that's what's holding the esports back for sure. But mainly I would say in like the West, because like you only have like a handful of esports scholarships on the West Coast. You've got Berkeley, you've got Irvine. I want to say Menlo Atherton might have one. I don't know. But these schools aren't doing anything because they don't think esports is anything. They're these giant schools that have way more things to deal with, way more things that they think are more important. And then you go to the Midwest, to all these schools who are starving for kids, who are starving for money. And this is where I graduated school. So I was able to see this happen in full. They are diving into esports right now. They're building esports centers, converting classrooms into esports centers. And like it's honestly amazing to see. Like you have esports scholarships popping up in the Midwest, and you have like these kids. I'll be talking to these kids, right? And it'll be like I was talking to my college's League of Legends teams, and they're all on scholarship. A lot of these kids are just from local. I went to a college in Missouri, just a very small liberal arts school. Don't go there. And all of these kids were being recruited from local high schools, local Missouri high schools, like from very small stick towns. They're like, yeah, I played Overwatch for about a year and a half now. And like, it's like, I was kind of shocked because I'm like, there's so many like better play, like, there's like, sure, they were fine. But I mean, they didn't win much, but they're having fun, and it just shows like the infrastructure is being set by these schools in the Midwest right now. And that's what's just going to keep, like the Midwest is just going to keep on growing to the point where it's going to be kind of like a bubble. And then these big name schools that really don't need esports to recruit kids, they don't need esports. They're like the Stanfords, stuff like that. They don't need esports. They could be just fine without it. Once they see that it's making them money and that, it's something that kids want to do for sure, like they're going to start wondering, well, what's a Stanford esports program going to look like? We could convert this to an esports building sort of thing, you know? And it's just like, I think it's, sorry, another tangent, but I think what's holding a lot of universities back from making their own teams is just like, it's like, you got to get the computers, you got to get the stable Wi-Fi, you got to find a space to put them all in. And then after all that, you got to find players for all that too. You got to find a coach. And that's kind of similar to high school esports as well, is that you've got these high school club directors who, by the way, I don't want to knock these guys. These high school club directors are like responsible for like creating the change we need in esports and creating these high school programs, the high school infrastructure. They are the start. They're the pioneers, okay? But you can't hire one person to coach every esports team on it. That'd be like if you didn't have traditional sports, right? You had like a club lacrosse team, a club volleyball team, a club soccer team. They all come together like, hey, we want traditional sports at our school. And so they say, oh, sure, here's the sports team. And they just had one coach lacrosse, soccer, volleyball. It's like, sure, he probably knows a little bit about it if they found this guy. But really, if you want your kids to make it to the next level, you want to make this system, a real system like traditional sports. You have to have someone who knows about the esport, who just is there to just coach League of Legends, just to coach Overwatch. And maybe they need an assistant coach too. Maybe they need someone to kind of to knock their brains with so that they can, not get stagnated on their own ideas in their head about what they want with the team. Right now, it's kind of bare minimum, in my opinion. You've got a club director. I kind of want to call it you've got athletic directors. I want to call it an athletic director. They kind of run all the esports, and they kind of just overlook it, And then you have these high school students. They'll coach each other, and that's cool. That's great. It's great for building like leadership and stuff like that. But really, you need coaches to coach, and you need the players to play. And when you have the coaches or the players playing or coaching and playing, it kind of makes it hard to play. You can get a little tilted from it too when you're trying to worrying about what someone else is doing and what you're doing. It can be kind of hard. That's what's stopping high school esports now too. And that's what's that's what's stagnating it right now, is that high schools don't want to hire an Overwatch coach and an Overwatch assistant coach. And that's what kids need. Like, you need as many adults overlooking your game as possible. The more people telling you what you could be doing better, the better you're going to be doing. But right now, all they have is maybe a club director, and then their teammates who maybe there's a teammate on their team who's a higher rank or something like that, and so that's kind of their authority is they've got the higher rank, so they say whatever they say goes. It just seems like a weird dynamic to me. I don't know. Maybe it's something to where I'm too old for this or whatever. I don't understand it. But if I was playing traditional sports when I was a kid and I had to get coached by my teammates, I would not be able to. I'd be so mad. Because I think it's also kind of hard for some students personally to take coaching from other kids their age. It's a little easier for a high schooler to get coached by, say, a college student. And that's how you'll see those AAU style systems. It's they'll hire lots of the time college level students because they have that great understanding, but then they can also connect well with high schoolers, which is kind of what we want to hit too.
That makes sense. So for our listeners, tell them where they could find you. If anyone in the Bay Area is looking for something like this, where would they get hooked up with you, and where can they follow what you're doing?
You can give me a follow at Pipeline Gaming on Twitter. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I don't know. Do people throw that on here?
Sure. There is no wrong answer to this question.
True. So yeah, Twitter's cool. You can follow Pipeline Gaming on Twitter. We've got lots more coming over the next year. We're talking to lots of different esports organizations about possibly, getting this started in other areas as well, not just the Bay Area. So
makes sense. All right, Stephen Buhl, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. We appreciated hearing about your business model and what you're going to do for the gaming community.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to check back every week for more episodes. Our newest segment with the company, in case you missed it, can be found on Instagram at eSports Business News under that handle. If you have a moment to subscribe to the pod on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review or offer us some feedback, we greatly appreciate it. We love positivity, but also we want to make this show the best it can be. If you want to do more to support us, consider joining our Patreon under Top Score Solutions and get access to exclusive content and perks. We've also put links to our Discord, Twitter, Facebook, and website in a shortened link on the show post. We appreciate you listening. Stay gold, everyone.